Hello, it's me. I am going to, yes, I think I can start this by saying that I'm a little drunk. I still am a little drunk. I've always been a little drunk. Here we go. Um, this deck. How did I get this deck? This is another deck that I mostly built myself. It's a modern deck, like the Goblin deck that I showed you earlier. And, I started this. I built this. It must have been around December 2015. I would say when I started playing Magic again. Um, and basically, what happened is that I realized that I really love playing blue. I love blue Magic. I love controlling the game. I love telling my opponent what to do and deciding what they get to play. And I realized that I wanted to build a blue deck to play. But I realized that also that control magic and blue magic specifically, that does this sort of thing, is often very expensive because it is often a modern staple. These sorts of effects because they are, of course, very powerful and basically all the major power decks have included blue historically since 1993. So I looked up a budget deck, a blue-black control deck, and I found this, and I built on it, and at this point, it is mostly my own, so I'm not going to mention, what was originally in it, I think. At this point, yeah, this is a thing that scared me, and I think in original recording I just talked about this for a little bit, so we're going to have some time here to look at this. And I can mention some things in the meantime, if I can think of anything. Uh, I'm going to start here going over the non-basic lands, since that's the easiest thing to do, of course, since they don't require as much explanation. And, most of them are not going to be very interesting or reveal a lot about the deck, of course. But I'll lead up to it, and eventually we'll get into it, and we'll see what happens if I can start talking about it. I want to, not start talking about it now, because I'm going to spend a lot of time not doing anything if I do that. So, how are you doing? If you're looking at this, I'm going to pull it up in a little bit, like in a couple of hours or so, I think. But this land here is not very interesting. As you can see, it just, it's a dual land, as a standard in our colors that we're using here, blue-black. Black gives us a little bit more, a bit of an edge, I would say. It gives us some graveyard effects, and lets us, gives us some spot and larger creature removal, as we'll see shortly. Here we go, yes, non-basic lands. So as I mentioned, this land is not very interesting. It's just a dual land, and if we have one of the corresponding basic lands in our hands, and we reveal it, then it comes into play untapped, and we can use the turn that we played it. Otherwise, there's nothing really to mention here. I got these from Shadows over Innistrad drafts that I did around that time. It would have been like summer of 2016, sorry. It's the only good thing I've gotten out of Shadows over Innistrad. This is a similar deal. A more expensive Zendikar land. That is just, again, a dual land. And if we have two or more basic lands, it comes into play untapped. Otherwise, we have to wait a turn. It also has the basic land types, island and swamp, so we can use it to reveal it for the Choked Estuary and put that into play untapped. Otherwise, yeah, Howlhammer Depths. This is probably the only one that actually matters to the playing of the deck itself. As you can see, this always comes into play tapped. It produces blue mana, like an island. That's functionally what it is to us. And when it comes to play, we get to look at the top 3 cards of the library and put them back in any order. So it's basically just a limited scrying ability. If it allowed us to scry, obviously we could pick whether to put him on the top or bottom. But otherwise, it's not that big of a deal. And I'll get to how exactly this interacts with the deck shortly. But it's useful, obviously, to rearrange things, in order that you're going to draw them. Even if you don't have any effects that work with that and exploit it in a specific way. Yeah. One problem with recording, after I've actually done the presentation once, is that I am off sync with myself pretty drastically. But anyway, Nephalia Drownier, this is the one that sort of hints at what the deck does. Makes colorless, and Can I look at that? Okay. As you can see, it has a secondary ability for one colorless, one blue, one black, and tap it, and it lets us, yeah, you can read that. Top 3 cards of library of target player into the graveyard. That is called milling. Milling is the main strategy of this deck. It's how we win, and to understand how that works, I'm going to have to explain. First off, milling, the word itself, is derived from the card Millstone, which was first printed in Antiquities in 1993. It's the first card that uses this ability, and what it does is, force your opponent to discard certain, a certain number of cards from their library to the graveyard. And why this is good is that there's an alternate win condition, which says that if at any time a player has to draw a card from their deck and is unable to, they instantly lose the game. So by forcing our opponent to discard cards from their library, we can eventually force them to lose the game when they next have to draw. And that's what this deck does, as we'll discover shortly. And I hope you don't hear me moving around in my chair a lot, because that's going to be awkward. But anyways, eventually, I'll be able to move off the screen, once I stop talking about it. Here we go. What did I do next? I can't remember. We'll see. God, please, move on. Please. What is this faggot doing? Seriously? Like, what the hell? What was I saying? I can't remember. It was... God, this was like 10 hours ago? Jeez. What an awful time. We have 20 minutes to go. I'm gonna die. I think next I looked at the enchantments. I must have, because the most important deck, the most important card in this deck, the most central one to this deck, to its functionality, is an enchantment. Yeah, as you can see here, 24 of the spells that we have here are instants or sorceries, which are the ephemeral card types, obviously. So this deck doesn't do a lot of stuff that sticks around permanently, as we'll discover. But enchantments, yes, the most important, the only enchantment we have, 2 cards, uniquely. 2 cards for the most important spell in the deck is not a lot, as you might guess, but I'll explain also why we only have 2 in a little bit when we get there. Yeah, so as you can see, Sphinx's Tutelage, 3 mana, and whenever we draw a card, a target opponent has to mill 2 cards. And if they're both, they share a single color, they repeat that process until they eventually mill 2 cards that don't share color. It also has a secondary ability for 6 mana, which is quite a lot, but it's an emergency ability that allows us to draw and then discard a card. Obviously to trigger the primary ability of Tutelage in case we need that and we don't have any other drawing effects. Drawing and discarding cards, that's called looting, after a card called, I don't know, it's something, adjective looter, that has that ability. I don't know what to say. I'll explain how this all works when you get to the relevant cards. But basically, we just have to build a deck around this that allows us to draw many cards whenever we want them. And otherwise, I don't really have a lot to make this very good. Depending on the deck type, this may be more or less effective. Obviously, if the opponent just has an entirely colorless deck, this is going to be a very slow strategy. And that's really the main issue that milling decks have. They're extremely slow. And especially if you're playing against direct damage decks, they will probably kill you before you really get to do anything. Creatures, we only have 5 creatures total, 3 unique ones. This is the one that has been around the longest. It was the original build as well. Augur of Bolas, 2 mana, 1/3, which is very cost effective. It allows us to, because it's a very good blocker, and that's really all we need because this isn't the sort of deck that kills people, directly with damage. And as you can see, when it comes into play, we get to look at the top 3 cards of our library. Remember the Holomere Depths there. And we can reveal an instant or sorcery, of which we have quite a lot, as I've mentioned. 2/3 of the spells are instants or sorceries. And, reveal one, put it in our hand, the rest go on the bottom, and we get an instant or sorcery, in our hand directly, just from playing this. And we get the blocker creature as well, so that's a very good deal. And I'll show you exactly what sorts of instants and sorceries we can get, obviously, but that's not really relevant right now. I'm gonna fall asleep. Okay, Wow, I am certainly saying a lot of words. God, well, we're almost halfway through. Wow. I didn't. It didn't seem like this short a time when I was actually talking. Now I've already been speaking for 10 minutes. That's incredible. I don't know if I said anything else useful. You can probably figure out why, being able to get instance sorceries instantly is a very good ability. Also, but however, sometimes if you don't know what you actually have on top of your library, it can sort of hurt you more because you get stuff that you don't actually, you don't actually get anything. You just have to put stuff on the bottom of your library. And sometimes you can waste very good cards that way. Now I'm just looking for a better scan of that card, but I'm not going to find one. So, yeah. That's not. Yeah, you can probably make that out, can't you? Jace's Phantasm. Um, a very nice little creature that we have. It's more a backup thing. Honestly, again, it's mostly a blocker, to prevent creature-based decks from really coming through and hitting us a lot. We only have two of them, but that's usually good enough to prevent anything major from getting through and hurting us. And even if we can't, there are ways to prevent us from dying from just getting hit constantly, as we'll see. But anyway, as you can see, 1/1, flying, that's already pretty good for 1 mana. And as long as the opponent has 10 or more cards in their graveyard, it gets +4/+4. So we get a 5/5 flyer for 1 mana, which is pretty fucking good. And the only thing we need to activate that ability, obviously, is to just keep playing the deck effectively. So that's not really a cost, is it? Yeah, 5/5 flying is pretty fucking good, especially, most decks don't actually have that many flyers. Anyway, we only have one of these. I really need to put in more, but anyways, Hedron Crab, 1 mana again, 0/2, which obviously means not gonna hit anyone very hard. It has a landfall ability, which means whenever we play a land, that triggers. And what this one doesn't specifically is force our opponent to mill 3 cards. So again, it triggers a lot of his strategies. It also helps back up the Sphinx's tutelage in case we don't get any draw triggers. We still get to mill our opponent. And that's basically all it does. As you can see there, yeah, it's a very cute crab looking at a Hedron. I can't remember what the Hedrons are. They're a Zendikar thing. I know they're like little artifacts that have been put in place to, bind the Eldrazi or something like that, and they're used to summon them basically in that storyline. But I don't know a lot about Zendikar, honestly. It was kind of the set that followed. The one that came out immediately when I left, when I stopped playing Standard back in 2008. So I never really got into it that much. Here we go. Next, I think Planeswalkers is what I looked at. Planeswalkers and Artifacts, of which we don't have a lot. We have 5 cards in total there, and 3 unique ones. This is the only artifact we have, but it's quite a useful one, a very versatile one. For 1 mana, which is, one of the best 1-drops we have, actually. 2 mana, tap it, sacrifice it, and we gain 5 life first off, which is very good for that sort of cost. And also, it allows us to shuffle the entire graveyard, including the elixir itself, into our library, which means we get a recursive effect, which allows us to play the cards we've already played again. And especially with the mechanisms we have for finding cards that I'll show you later, that means we can repeat the effects of whatever cards we find, many, many times. Also, I don't know if you're aware, if we play both Sphinx's tutelages, which again, I shouldn't really get more, but anyways, if you play both of them, of course, it triggers twice with every single card we draw, and that's very, very good, That means we mill twice as fast. Anyway, Planeswalkers. I should explain Planeswalkers first off. They were introduced, in Lorwyn actually when I started playing, 2007. At this point, they're a regular card type, but back then it was exciting. Planeswalkers are, what the player characters are supposed to be in Magic. They're very powerful sorcerers that can move across the many realities that exist in the universe, and they come into play with a number of loyalty counters that you can see in the bottom right, and we just trigger those abilities to change the number of loyalty counters and do certain things. This is the original Jace Beleren from the Lorwyn set, and as you can see, 3 loyalty counters for 3 mana. The +2 and -1 abilities allow us to either target it or generally draw cards, which again allows us to trigger the Sphinx's tutelage. And the ultimate ability for -10, so we have to trigger the +2 a minimum of 4 times. That just allows us to mill 20 our opponent, which 20 cards is quite a lot. You know, we only have to do it 3 times, which is a bit, but, you know, obviously we're doing other things as well, to, guaranteed, basically, destroy our opponent. We also have the original Liliana Vess from that same set for 5 mana, 5 loyalty counters. That gives us a discard effect, a targeted discard effect for +1. The -2 effect is very useful. I sometimes, I just play the Liliana to allow me to find another card. -2 just lets us search our library for any card and put that on top of the library. That's just a basic tutoring effect, but to catch all, so we can find any card. And the ultimate for -8 just lets us take all creature cards in all graveyards and put them onto the battlefield under our control. There's a certain card that lets us make that into much more deadly effect, but I'll get to that when we get there. And otherwise, obviously, just from milling, we're going to end up with a lot of creature cards in graveyards. And with this ultimate, we can just put them into play on our side. And that's usually a guaranteed win, because it's doubtful that the opponent has anything in place to deal with that sort of threat immediately, I'm going to put the phone down for a sec to clean my glasses. Hopefully I don't miss anything important. I'll be right back. In the meantime, I'm getting back to instants and sorceries here, and we can basically split these into 3 distinct categories, which are counter spells, removal spells, and miscellaneous, game-winning and mill-enhancing effects. And we'll get to the counter spells first, because they're most versatile and easy to explain. They just cover every single type of card that the opponent plays, basically, and just allows us to keep them from ever coming into play, which is very useful, naturally, as you might imagine. I'm looking at these right now, very slowly, because I'm talking about something else, probably, that I can't remember. And in a couple of years, we'll get there, and I'll be able to tell you about them. But we're looking at one right now, which is probably the last one that I covered, I think. Wow, this is exhausting. Oh, jeez. Anyway, yeah. Nice day outside. God, I'm tired. Oh, wow. I missed you. I missed you a lot. I hope you stick around. I love you. Someday we'll get married, I think, if that works out. Here we go. Yes, Mana Leak. This is the most general one. It counters every single type of spell, as you can see, and it's just a general, we play it for 2 mana, and it counters a spell, that we're targeting, unless that controller manages to pay 3 extra colorless mana. Negate is basically the same deal, except it's an absolute counter, but it only works on non-creature spells. This is especially good against those direct damage type decks that I mentioned earlier, because obviously any instant or sorcery that sort of deck type tries to cast, we can just block it instantly. Of course, we only have 2 of these. The sideboard, which I'm not going to cover, I think, because I don't think I covered it in the Goblin deck video either. The sideboard contains a lot of specific instants and sorceries and counter spells that, allow us to target specific types of decks with certain colors, etc., that they play. That we can replace these with. Condescend has a variable cost, and it's basically just, a variable cost mana leak with an extra scrying ability, which lets us look at the top 2 cards and rearrange those at will. And yeah, otherwise it's just, the opponent doesn't get to play whatever we're targeting unless they pay an extra colorless cost, and we can just dump anything we have left at the end of the turn into that. And that's all the counter spells we have in the main deck, except for this one, which I never really use it as a counter spell. I'll explain the secondary ability in a second, but, in theory we can use this, as you can see, counter this spell unless its controller discards their entire hand, which, depending on how many cards they have in their hand, can be very useful or very not useful. If you know the opponent has, very important combo type cards in their hand, this can be a very effective disrupting tool because obviously they don't want to discard those cards that are so important to them. And now we're going to look at their removal spells, which are exclusively black, obviously. We have some spot removal here, which is basically identical except for the condition. Go for the throat. 2 mana, destroy target non-artifact creature. Very simple, very easy to understand. Destroys with, just a possibility of regeneration we should never see. Doomblade does the same thing, except it's for non-black creatures. And again, those are more useful depending on what sort of deck you're going against. If you're playing against a mono-black deck, then Doomblade is not going to be very effective. Naturally. And this is a more general, whole surface removal. Drown in Sorrow, 3 mana, -2/-2 for all creatures, and we get a scrying effect as well. This is especially good against token decks, which I don't see that much anymore. I think I haven't played Magic in forever. But, yeah, obviously, those are usually tokens that are 1/1, and this kills every single one of them in a single go, and that's it. That's just it. Wow. Otherwise, yeah, you can see. Here we go. What am I going to look at now? Yes, the general spells. I think I just went through these in order. What the fuck am I doing? Okay, Mind Sculpt. Mind Sculpt. Can we look at that, please? Excuse me? Hello? Yes. Mind Sculpt. 2 mana. Two mana, sorcery speed, which means we can play during our opponent's turn, and target opponent mills 7. Now this is actually an inferior version of another spell that I'm going to take a look at now, which I don't run because it's absurdly expensive. Mind Sculpt is just like a little, like 20-cent card. Probably like 50 US cents. This one costs like, I don't know, like some absurd amount, like 5 euros per card. That's called Glimpse the Unthinkable. It's, blue-black, so it would actually fit perfectly in this deck. Sorcery speed as well, but this one mills 10. So, which is only a difference of 3 cards for a single spell, but if we have all 3 of them, as I do here, that adds up to, 9, obviously, which gives a pretty significant edge. But, I don't really care that much. We have a similar spell. No, I'm going to show that later. We have here, Compulsive Research. This is the best draw trigger that we have. I think we have another draw trigger in the sideboard to replace certain cards with. But this one just lets us draw 3 cards. That's 3 guaranteed triggers. And we would have to discard either 2 cards or a single land card, which you often can do because we don't need that big a land base. And we have a bunch of filler land cards, obviously, the basic lands that we don't need that much. And we can just draw 3 cards basically for free and trigger the Sphinx's Tutelage 3 times. That's pretty good. Here we go. Startled Awake. This is a very cool card. Sorcery speed again. Mills for 13 for 4 mana. So it's not as, obviously not as cost effective. We can just play the Mind Sculpt twice and we get 1 extra card for the same cost. However, after we play it, once it's in our graveyard, as you can see, it has a secondary ability. For 5 mana, we transform it, we flip it over and put it into play. Sorcery speed again. And then, flipped over, it's a 1/1 creature with Skulk, meaning it's unblockable by any creature with power greater than 1. And when it hits a player, it comes back in our hand, and we get to play it again. And mill for another 13, which is pretty fucking good, if you ask me. Should probably get one more of these too. I need more of every single card, except for the ones that I don't need more of. Anyway, I think next I'm going to look at the Crypt Incursion, which is the card that I mentioned as, allowing Liliana's ultimate ability to work out far better and more effectively. No, that's not true at all, actually. It blocks her ultimate ability completely. I don't know why I mentioned that. it just lets us exile all creature cards from a target player's graveyard. We can target ourselves too, but it wouldn't really do that much in most situations. And we gain 3 life for every single card that we exile in this manner. Which again, as I've mentioned, for creature-based decks with effective milling, that can mean quite a lot of life with a single turn for 3 mana if this doesn't get countered. And that can pretty much put us in a safe spot where our opponent can't do anything. I've often had people concede just when I play this because I end up at like 40 plus life, which is more than most people can deal with. Wow, we're almost finished. This was much easier in the second run. Wait, I already knew what I was gonna say. Finally, Perplex, the secondary ability that I mentioned. We already know what this does, but far more importantly, and why I actually run this spell, the transmute ability. Transmute just lets us discard a card for a certain cost, and then we can find we fetch another card with the same converted cost from our library. Now, the most important one that we have that has a converted mana cost of 3 is of course the Sphinx's Tutelage. So we don't even need necessarily those 2 cards in our starting hand. We can just have a Perplex in our hand. It's basically the same thing ultimately if we have the ability to cast that transmute cost, meaning we have an extra 4 Sphinx Tutelage shortcuts essentially, and yeah. As I'll demonstrate when I start playing the deck, that is, I'll require for an effective strategy. Yeah, that's it, basically. I got through this very quickly. Wow. And yeah, I'll see you in a little bit after the break when I start demonstrating how this deck plays, how we do things with it, and hopefully it all works out and I can show you everything I just mentioned. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in a little bit. I love you. Hello. I apologize in advance if I sound a little unenthusiastic. As I've probably mentioned, I'm kind of sick, but I'm going to do my best to follow along with this. On a very fascinating first turn, I just played a land, and now I'm just going to play another. I think it was a Drown Yard, yes, which I wound up never using, but it's useful to have. And I just kept open those 2 mana for a mana leak, which I'm not needing right now. Third land drop, and transmute that into our first Sphinx's Tutelage. A very good flow of play so far. Next turn logic that we're going to play the Tutelage as well. Oh boy. Hope I'm not making too much noise here by accident. Yeah, that's our first draw trigger. You can't really, if you take a look at the upper left corner, just under the opponent's life total, you can see how many cards they have left in their library. But I wasn't really paying attention, I just keep working until I realize that I'm down to like 10 or less, and then I focus on ways to most efficiently get my opponent to lose. That's a hatchling. That it starts out as a 2/2 with a bunch of -1/-1 counters on it, and whenever you play a spell of one of the corresponding colors, one of those counters disappears, and eventually it goes into a 6/6, which is pretty threatening. So I'm trying to figure out a way to destroy this, and the opponent is about to play. Oh yeah. I tried to counter the. Yeah, I didn't see how much mana they actually had left, and they did pay the 3 mana for the mana leak. However, I kind of prevented them from also casting any other spells. I don't know, that was kind of a waste. Anyway, that's a creature. That's a 1/1 flyer that can regenerate any creature for 3 white or black mana. That's pretty fucking annoying, as I found in early plays against this deck, so that's going to have to be taken care of as well. In the meantime, we're going to go for Throat and destroy that hatchling. And you can see I'm just taking hits here left and right, and that is a pretty common feature of play with this deck. Obviously life total isn't that important since you're not playing that sort of game in the first place, so I often let myself be hit. If I'm, obviously, I also hope that I eventually get an Elixir of Immortality. If I don't, I'm kind of in trouble, but it works out, usually. So now I'm just reordering these colors, these cards, after playing the Halmar Depths. And I'm going to get myself a Mind Sculpt first, and then some removal, and then an island, which I might not really need at this point. And I'm going to hit, no I'm not. Yeah, because obviously the opponent can still pay the regeneration activation costs, so if I played the Doomblade now, it would just do nothing. That's not very smart. And I'm spending like a million hours realizing this because I was very tired when I recorded this. I'm not always tired, but, you know, relatively speaking, there are times when I'm less exhausted than I have to be to do work properly. Yeah, so we're just cruising along here. I'm playing my Phantasm since it's just gotten the condition to be 5/5, and that should deal with any threats for now effectively. I figure. See, I'm mixing up the THF sounds. That's a sign of tiredness. God, when I was small, I just could not figure out how to make a TH sound at all. And then when I was in 8th grade, I think I got it just by accident. It's weird. Yeah, okay, I'm countering this. That's an exile spell. That's aimed at my Phantasm, and I don't want that, so Monolink, and this time it works, and that's not being played. However, he does come out with an aura next that prevents it from attacking or blocking, so functionally it's exiled. I don't have anything to remove enchantments, so, you know, that's permanent, and I don't have any monolithic counterspells either, so tough luck. I don't know why it took like so many years looking at that card. It's not even that. I mean, it's kind of pretty, but there's no reason to spend this much time looking at it. I actually got pretty close, you know, to the danger zone in terms of life totals here, and I never did get an elixir, but I played quickly enough. Oh yeah, right. Well, I didn't get the elixir, but I did get the Crypt Incursion that I had in my hand, and now I'm just counting the number of creatures. I think it was 7? It must be 7, so I would get 21 life, which puts me pretty far ahead. This deck that I'm playing against is actually a life gain deck, which obviously seeks to make it impossible for you to win by going up to a very high life total. And it's kind of unfair to play against it because obviously we don't win by killing our opponents, so this deck's primary strategy is completely useless against us. And now with the other mana that I have left, I just play a Mind Sculpt because Mind Sculpt always helps. Opponent's down to 23 cards in their library, which is about a third of the way down. Yeah, land drop, and I'm going to play the, or am I? Yeah, yes, this turn. Earlier you could see I wanted to play the Drowned Sorrow, and then I realized it might be a good time to go for the Crypt Incursion. And, oh my god, I didn't see what I scried, but we'll see next turn when I draw it. Oh, it's a compulsory research. That's perfect. That obviously is going to trigger it 3 times, the Sphinx Tutelage, and I think that gets our opponent down to like 11, if I'm lucky. I discard the land because I don't need that. And I got another Perplex as well, which, as we'll see now, yeah, this part is completely irrelevant. I don't know why I spent time on this, since I knew I was going to transmute anyways, so it didn't matter whatever the cards were in. I'm going to transmute again, not for the second Sphinx's Tutelage, since we're in such a late part of the game. I'm just going to get another Compulsive Research, and the opponent will have 7 cards left in their library next turn, so that will be... It's not a guaranteed win, is it? But in this case, oh yeah, because they have 5 left now. Okay. Okay, and we're going to trigger that another 3 times, and mill the rest of their cards in their deck, and when I end my turn, they're going to gain 1 life during their upkeep, and they will lose. Watch. Here it goes. Life gain. Game over. Thank you very much. See ya.